Hey guys, tonight we travel back to ancient China, to a world of moonlit courtyards, whispering bamboo, and the soft clink of porcelain lids. Tonight we explore the forgotten tea rituals of the Tang Dynasty. And yes, before you ask, there will be scholars, there will be monks, there will be ghost stories over bitter leaves. But don't get too cozy. If you were caught disrespecting the tea bowl back then, you could be laughed out of polite society. Or worse, end up the subject of a very embarrassing poem. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far these sleepy little history tales travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive at twilight in Chang'an, the heart of the Tang Empire. The city's wide streets shimmer with lantern light, and the scent of sandalwood curls up from shopfronts like incense gossiping to the wind. Market stalls are shutting down silk-wrapped couriers, move like shadows between mansions, and somewhere nearby, a cat knocks over a ceramic pot and pretends it was on purpose. Classic Chang'an. This isn't just any city. This was the most cosmopolitan capital of its time, bustling with Persians, Turks, Sogdians, Koreans, and monks from every compass point. And while all manner of trade passed through these gates, spices, silks, rhino horn. Don't ask, one thing united the rich and poor alike: tea. But not the kind you're used to. Back in the Tang Dynasty, tea wasn't tossed in a bag and steeped with a timer. Oh no. It was pressed into cakes, shaved or ground, and then whisked with hot water. The results were somewhere between a soup and a spell. You didn't just have tea. You performed it, recited to it, sometimes even sang to it. You duck under a painted arch and step into a narrow courtyard where a small gathering is underway. Laughter spills like wine, though the only drink in sight is tea, thick green and steaming in wide ceramic bowls. This is tea as poetry, as flirtation, as a kind of low-key spiritual seance. At the center of the gathering sits a scholar with ink-stained sleeves and a smug expression. He's preparing a tea called lucha green tea cake ground into powder. He sprinkles it into a heated bowl, adds water from a kettle shaped like a crane, and begins to whisk. The brush strokes aren't random. They follow patterns, slow then quick drawing circles that mimic celestial orbits. To him, this isn't a drink, it's a philosophy. Tea in the Tang Dynasty had begun to evolve beyond mere medicine. The earliest records describe it as a digestive aid. Monks drank it to stay awake during long chants. But by the time of Lu Yu, the famed sage of tea had become a cultural language of its own. His Cha-Jing, or classic of tea, was part how-to manual, part philosophical musing, part low-key judgment on anyone who boiled water too fast. And yes, people argued about it. A lot. Historians still argue whether this early tea culture was truly widespread, or if it was mostly limited to intellectual elites. But what's clear is that by the mid-Tang period, tea was everywhere, from palace halls to farmer sheds, from river barges to mountaintop temples. As you sip a bowl handed to you, thick vegetal, slightly bitter, you listen. The scholar quotes a couplet. A lady corrects him. He blames the tea. Everyone laughs. And you realize something in this moment. Tea is doing what it still does today. It's connecting people. But here, the connections go deeper than caffeine and conversation. Tea in the Tang era could carry subtle political statements. One poet might serve a rare varietal only found in Imperial Gardens flex. Another might quote a line from a banned text while pouring his second bowl rebellion disguised as hospitality. And of course, tea was also love language. The way someone filled your cup or didn't could signal affection, disdain, flirtation, or epic shade. One famous courtesan of the time was said to reject suitors by gently tipping her tea bowl away from them. It worked, until one clever man served her tea in a bowl with no bottom. You lean back against a wooden beam, warmed by laughter and steam. A breeze stirs the lanterns. A drop of tea trickles down your wrist. You let it stay, because here, at the beginning of your journey through the Tang tea world, you already feel the ritual taking root in you, not in your hands, but in your pace. Your breath slows, your thoughts soften. The world for a moment is measured not in hours, but in sips. You wake the next morning, not in your own bed, but in a quiet guest chamber shaded by rice paper screens. Sunlight seeps through in thin gold lines. A tea tray waits by the door, already steeped, still warm. Someone rose before you and made it with care. You sip, and it's not the bitterness or the heat that stirs you. It's the memory it brings. Of lanterns. Of quiet laughter. Of a green swirl circling like a galaxy in a bowl. Today you walk deeper into the Tang Dynasty's relationship with tea beyond its social settings and toward its spiritual core. Because tea wasn't just a drink, it was a doorway. You head up into the hills that cradle the city toward a temple built into the curve of a mountain. The path is steep and lined with pine. Cicadas buzz. Somewhere a bell chimes lazily. Monks greet you not with words, but with a bow and a cup. Here, tea is not about performance. It's about presence. You sit cross-legged on woven mats in a wide, airy room where windows are left open to the wind. A monk with eyebrows like brushstrokes serves you a pale infusion brewed from wild leaves. He doesn't ask questions. He simply pours and waits. This is tea as meditation. In Tang, China, Buddhist monasteries were both preservers and perfecters of tea craft. It was monks who helped develop the grinding and whisking method. Monks who planted high-altitude tea gardens for clarity and calm. And monks who understood that to sit still and drink in silence could sometimes say more than any 1,000-character scroll. Tea ceremonies became extensions of Chan Buddhism, what we'd now call Zen. The act of preparing tea with care of drinking with full attention was a lesson in mindfulness. Before mindfulness was trendy, before it was even a word. The monk beside you closes his eyes as he sips, like each swallow is a verse. You try to mimic him. You spill a little on your sleeve. He doesn't mind. In these temples, tea had rules, but they weren't rigid. They were gentle reminders. Never rush the pour. Never overfill the cup. Always warm the bowl before serving. Because hospitality wasn't just polite. It was holy. There's a scroll on the wall behind the altar. Painted ink, soft and simple. Just a single tea leaf perfectly curled. Underneath the characters, read, 1 leaf. 10,000 thoughts. You think about that for a while. You're served Yue Guangbai Moonlight White, a tea named for the way it's picked by hand under moonlight to avoid bruising the leaf. It's floral clean, and somehow feels like drinking the idea of clarity. A monk speaks finally. He tells you that dreams are clearer with good tea, that bitterness can sharpen vision, that the gods whisper more gently to those who don't slurp. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles. Joke, he says. Mostly. Historians still argue whether monastic tea ceremonies of the Tang period were formalized rituals or more improvised, evolving with each monastery's style. Some suggest these early temple practices directly influenced the highly structured Japanese tea ceremonies developed centuries later. Others believe they were more personal, more fluid, less about choreography, more about intention. You set your cup down and let your hands rest on your knees. The mountain air moves across your face. In the distance, a single bird sings once and stops. Nothing follows it. The silence is full. In Tang monasteries, silence was part of the tea. A moment for reflection, a breath between sips. Sometimes a single drop of tea was left at the bottom of the bowl, an offering, or a reminder that nothing is ever truly finished, that the last sip belongs to time itself. You're invited to walk the garden before you go. The paths curve like ink strokes. A stream gurgles. Teapots shaped like peaches rest beneath a tree waiting to be cleaned. A spider spins a web between two slender bamboo stalks. And then, before you leave, the monk presses a small pouch into your hand. Inside, a few loose leaves. No label, he says. Just memory. You bow awkwardly, but sincerely, and begin your descent back to the city. Your step is slower now, not heavy, just thoughtful. Because once you've had tea like that in quiet, in kindness, you can't help but carry a little of it with you. And that's the point. Tea isn't a flavor, it's a pace. The winding path brings you back into the city. But something's changed. You still hear the chatter of merchants, the rattle of carts, the soft thump of bamboo mallets pounding fresh dough, but it's as if everything's moving just a little slower. Or maybe you are. Blame the monks. You drift into a quiet courtyard where low tables are arranged like a chessboard in shade and sun. Bowls of tea sit half-finished beside brush scrolls and inkstones. This is no temple, no bustling tea market. It's a private gathering, a poetry salon. The Tang Dynasty was famously obsessed with poetry, and poetry was obsessed with tea. You find a seat at the edge. A host in embroidered saffron robes raises his cup to welcome you, then goes back to reciting something about a drifting cloud and a lost sandal. Everyone nods solemnly. You're pretty sure it's a metaphor for heartbreak, but the sandal really throws you. A young woman with ink-stained sleeves serves you a bowl of jancha sharp tea, named for its grassy bite and brief steep. You sip and nearly wince. Bold. But it wakes you. And you realize this is the third tea you've had today, each one completely different, not just in taste, but in mood, in meaning. At salons like these, Tang scholars mixed tea with everything music, ink, flirtation, politics. A poem might be inspired by the shape of the steam curling from a hot bowl. A verse might end with the sound of porcelain setting gently on wood. This was Tia's muse. The poet Lu Tong, for example, famously wrote a 7-part poem just about tea. Each cup he drank opened a new door in his mind, until by the 7th, he was flying with the immortals. Realistic. Not especially. Poetic, absolutely. You ask someone nearby if the tea is always this strong. He nods and says it's for clarity, then adds, also to survive the 3rd round of verses. Turns out these salons could last all night. Poets would gather after dusk, recite under lantern light, and share bowls until their words grew slow and their hands unsteady. Tea wasn't just a performance enhancer. It was the thread that kept the night from unraveling. And the rules few. There was a game called Ducha Tea Battling. Less violent than it sounds. Participants compared the clarity, aroma, and foam of their brewed tea scoring points for elegance. Losers might have to compose a verse on the spot, or drink another bowl, or both, depending on the host's sense of humor. You take another sip and feel your mind start to wander, not away, just sideways. The tea has opened a door. You remember a story you once read of a scholar who fell asleep during a poetry session and dreamed of a tea house built entirely of clouds. The cups refilled themselves. The verses were sung by cranes. He woke up and wrote nothing down, but the dream stayed with him forever. Historians still argue whether these poetic gatherings were exclusive events for elite literati, or whether more casual open-air versions flourished among artists and performers. Some scrolls suggest both existed, the former behind garden walls, the latter beside street stalls, each with its own flavor, its own rhythm. Your host recites a new verse. It ends with a line about the leaf that carries both silence and song. Everyone claps lightly, and a servant refills your bowl with something darker. Earthy, mushroomy grounding. The mood has shifted. It's late afternoon now. The shadows have stretched. You're asked if you'd like to contribute a verse. You hesitate. The others wait patiently. You clear your throat and say something about water memory and lost sandals. The host laughs kindly and clinks your bowl in salute. In that moment, you realize you've been welcomed, not as a guest, but as a fellow drinker, a dreamer, a leaf on the same branch. The conversation shifts toward more practical matters: the weather, the latest imperial exam scandal, the price of fish in Loyang. But the tea never stops flowing. Each pour feels like punctuation, a comma, a sigh, a pause. Someone produces a kin, a 7-stringed zither, and begins to play. The melody is spare, hesitant, like it's looking for its footing in the dusk. You lean back and watch the lanterns begin to glow. Somewhere in the city, drums signal the hour. And in this courtyard filled with quiet verse and steeping leaves, time stretches like silk. This is tea as art, as expression, as gentle rebellion against forgetting. You close your eyes for just a moment and think if dreams have a soundtrack, maybe it's the sound of tea being poured by moonlight, evening edges and slowly brushing rooftops with amber light. You leave the courtyard of poets behind your steps, soft and unfocused, like steam drifting above a cooling bowl. The city is quieter now, not asleep, just breathing differently. Your next stop isn't marked by stone lions or red-lacquered gates. There are no scholars here, no incense drifting from carved windows. Just a low shop, pressed between a noodle stand and a stack of wicker baskets, its bamboo curtain stirring in the wind. The smell hits you before you enter charcoal rice flour. Something faintly floral, and beneath it, all tea, but not the drink. The cake. Yes, tonight you're learning about the quieter side of Tang Dynasty tea culture, the kitchens. Because while poets sipped and scribes debated oxidation, most people, commoners, cooks, caravan traders, experienced tea in ways the scrolls didn't always mention. They chewed it, boiled it with rice, pressed it into bricks, or baked it into mooncakes, sweet and earthy, and shaped like lotus blossoms. You duck under the curtain and step into the glow of an oil lamp. A woman behind a stone counter is flattening discs of tea paste with the palm of her hand. Her apron is dusted with flour. She glances up, nods once, then gestures toward a low stool. You sit. She's making cha bing tea cakes. Not the dainty kind on porcelain saucers, but dense, hearty discs, meant for travel storage and trade. These cakes were the energy bars of the Tang Dynasty, packed with crushed leaves barley, and sometimes dried fruit or camphor. Perfect for tucking into a saddlebag before riding off into fog and bureaucracy. She offers you one still warm. It's slightly sweet, a little smoky with a bitterness that lingers in the back of your throat. You chew slowly. It tastes like work and patience, and something old trying to remember itself. Tea wasn't always elegant. It wasn't always served with poems and gongs. Sometimes it was labor, necessity, fuel for a merchant's journey, medicine for a feverish child. A ritual stirred with a bamboo spoon in the hands of someone who would never write a verse about it, but who would remember its taste forever. And sometimes, it was currency. You glance at a pile of wrapped tea bricks stacked near the doorway, stamped with patterns that look vaguely imperial. In border regions and mountain towns, tea bricks became a form of trade. You could buy a horse with tea, pay taxes, barter for medicine. In parts of Tibet and the western provinces, tea was more stable than silver, more portable than grain. One scholar even described a village where lovers exchanged tea bricks instead of letters. Practical, definitely. Romantic. Surprisingly, yes. The weight of it, the smell, the promise of warmth later. Historians still argue whether these practices started during the Tang or reached their peak later. But there's no doubt tea meant value, not just for what it did, but for what it represented. The woman wipes her hands and begins preparing something else, You watch her grind loose tea leaves with salt and orange peel using a small stone mortar. She adds ginger stirs in warm water, then pours it into a wide bowl and hands it to you. This isn't the elegant clarity of court tea. This is medicine, a folk blend. Her grandmother's remedy for chills, she says, or maybe heartbreak. Both feel equally plausible. You sip. It's strong, strange, alive with taste, and in that moment, you remember the priest's warning. Not all tea is meant to calm. Some is meant to stir. The kitchen smells different now. The fire pops. Something simmers in the back corner, and for a second, you're sure it's not soup, but memory. You feel as if you've been here before in a dream or a story someone else told. Maybe you have. Maybe this is how culture really moves, not with armies or edicts, but with soup pots and shared cups. A young boy bursts in, winded from running. He hands the woman a slip of paper carefully folded. She reads it, nods, then drops 2 wrapped tea bricks into his satchel. He bows grinning and disappears into the night. You want to ask where he's going, who the bricks are for, but something stops you. The mystery is enough. You look down at your bowl empty now and feel a strange comfort in your chest, like you've been given something precious and ordinary and strong. You thank the woman. She smiles without speaking and turns back to her grinding stone. As you step out into the cooling air, you catch one last scent from the hearth-dried chrysanthemum and cinnamon bark. The floral, the bitter, the bright. Like a memory you didn't know you were missing. You walk on, the streetlights flicker, and somewhere behind you, the fire keeps burning. The sky is a deep velvet, now hung with stars that feel close enough to sip. You walk along a stone path that hugs the riverbank, the water beside you, swirling in soft ribbons of reflected moonlight. Somewhere upstream, a flute plays, a melody too quiet to follow, too familiar to ignore. You're heading toward a monastery, small-weathered and wrapped in silence. It's perched on a low hill, tucked between cypress trees and mist. Lanterns sway from wooden beams like patient thoughts. This is not a place for ceremony. It's a place for simplicity. And the monks who live here? They know a thing or two about tea. Tonight, you've come to witness a ritual more intimate than grand, a form of tea practice that whispers instead of sings. Less about performance, more about presence. A quiet monk in faded saffron robes opens the gate. He greets you with a nod and a gesture toward the inner courtyard. You follow, stepping into a space that smells of pine needles, moss, and wet stone. He leads you to a bench where a small brazier glows like a sleeping heart. Above it hangs a battered copper kettle gently steaming. He doesn't speak, just prepares. This is Chancha Zen tea, a precursor to the Japanese tea ceremony born from the Tang Dynasty's blend of Buddhist stillness and practical devotion. Here, tea isn't about flavor or form. It's about mind. The monk begins by pouring hot water into a shallow bowl, then slowly adding finely powdered tea from a lacquered scoop. He stirs with a carved stick, slow, steady, no rush. You watch the foam form green and pale and thin as breath. Then he sets the bowl in front of you and bows. You lift it careful, not to slosh. The first sip is earthy, almost grassy, but it's not the taste that stops you. It's the stillness it brings. Monks in the Tang era believed tea could quiet the mind like a broom sweeping the floor of your thoughts. A preparation for meditation, a bridge between breath and awareness. You drink again, and this time you notice your own breathing. Slower now, more grounded, more present. There's a legend, maybe true, maybe not, of a monk named Lu Yu, who studied tea the way others studied scripture. He wrote a book the Cha Jing considered the first known monograph on tea. He cataloged leaf types, brewing methods, the merits of spring water versus well water. even how the shape of the teacup affected the soul. Historians still argue whether Lu Yu was a revolutionary or just a man with a lot of opinions about kettles. But one thing is certain: he believed tea was sacred, a practice, a purification, a path. The monk beside you hums a single note, not a song, just a sound. Then he rises and begins to sweep the courtyard stones with a broom of bundled reeds. Every stroke is deliberate. He's not cleaning the space, he's clearing it. In this moment, you understand something you hadn't before. The ritual isn't about the tea. It's about the attention, the boiling, the scooping, the stirring. Each step is a meditation, a reason to stay present, to feel the weight of the bowl, the warmth of the liquid, the echo of the steam. There's no scroll here, no audience, no praise, just two beings and a bowl. You sip again. This time the tea tastes like pine, or memory, or maybe just silence. A second monk arrives, younger, smiling with the ease of someone who hasn't yet questioned everything. He offers a tray of dried plum slices and slivers of candied ginger. You nibble slowly. The sweet and sour pull your senses into sharper focus. You think of all the teas you've had, the formal ones, the kitchen ones, the marketplace brews, and the poet's leaves, and how somehow this simple bowl feels like the quiet center of it all. A pause inside the storm. The monks don't speak much, but they watch, not with judgment, just presence. And you wonder what would happen if everyone drank tea like this? Slowly, intentionally, with no agenda but awareness. Maybe fewer wars, maybe longer naps, maybe just more kindness. You finish the bowl. The monk bows again. And this time, you bow back deeper. He doesn't walk you out. He knows you'll find your way. As you step back into the night, you realize the world feels different. Not changed, just clearer. The stars are still stars. The wind is still wind. But you are quieter now. More aligned. You follow the river back toward town, and every ripple feels like a conversation. Every tree like a companion. Every shadow like a thought you haven't had yet. And somewhere behind you, the copper kettle still simmers. Waiting, the moon still rides high, though it's begun its slow descent toward the western horizon. You walk now beneath bamboo groves, the stalks swaying with a rhythm that might be wind or memory. The ground crunches softly underfoot. Fallen leaves, fragments of last season's whispers. You're full of quiet tea and quieter thoughts. And then, unexpectedly, laughter. It bubbles out from a crooked side path, like warm steam, followed by the clink of ceramic and the unmistakable rustle of too many sleeves in too small a room. You follow it, of course, because this isn't just a story about sacred tea. It's about joy, too. Camaraderie. Chaos. The other tea ritual of the Tang Dynasty, the tea party. You arrive at a modest wooden pavilion, nestled half into a hillside, with red paper lanterns dangling crookedly from its eaves. Inside, a gathering of poets, artists, scholars with ink-stained fingers and opinions as loose as their belts. Bowls of tea are passed like secrets. Someone's reciting a verse about ducks. Someone else is asleep with their face in a scroll. It's perfect. You duck under the lanterns and slip inside. The host waves you in, an older man with eyebrows like storm clouds and a laugh that shakes the cups on the table. He pours you a bowl without asking, and you don't ask what's in it. You just drink. This is Chaju, the tea gathering. Not solemn, not quiet, but joyous, loud, poetic. These parties often blurred the line between literary salon and wild sleepover. The Tang Dynasty had no shortage of serious monks and meditating officials, but it also had a thriving tea scene full of creativity, debate, and occasional debauchery. Think open mic night at a Buddhist jazz cafe. A woman with a flute strikes a note sharp enough to cut moonlight. Everyone applauds. Then she sets it down and casually joins an argument about whether green tea is spiritually superior to brick tea. Spoiler, there's no consensus. There never is. Someone hands you a brush. You blink. They nod. Write something. So you do. Badly. You scribble a line about mist and lanterns, something vague enough to sound deep, and pass it on. The next person adds to it. Then another. And suddenly, you're part of a collaborative poem spiraling across the scroll like vines. It's not art. It's connection. That's the point. The Tang poets believed tea opened the heart, loosened the tongue, stirred the soul just enough to make poetry possible. Libai wrote about drinking tea while watching geese. He also once tried to hug the moon while drunk in a boat. Scholars still debate whether it was tea wine or moonlight poisoning. Probably all three. A woman near the corner spills her cup and shrugs, laughing. The floor was thirsty, she says. Everyone nods as if this is profound. Maybe it is. Someone starts brewing another round, this time with chrysanthemum petals and a pinch of salt. Why, no one knows. That's half the fun. The ritual here isn't measured. It's improvised. The bowls don't match. The tea isn't perfect. But the moment is. You sip again. And for a second, you taste cinnamon. Or memory. Or maybe just friendship. Historians still argue whether these gatherings influenced formal tea ceremonies later in Japan and Korea, or if they were just parallel evolutions of the same leaf. But what's clear is that Tang Dynasty tea parties weren't just social. They were spiritual in their own messy way. A place where the sacred slipped into the ridiculous and back again. A firefly drifts in through the window. Someone catches it in their hands and then lets it go. Everyone watches it vanish, and no one speaks for a while. Then someone recites a poem. Short. Soft. Something about waiting for spring even while the plum blossoms fall. You close your eyes for a moment, not from tiredness, just to hold it all in. The steam, the stanzas, the stupid jokes and sudden beauty. Then you rise, bow gently, and slip out before the next argument over oolong can begin. Outside, the bamboo groves are quieter. The path is familiar, but you feel a little lighter, a little brighter, like a paper lantern bobbing just above your own head. The tea tonight wasn't perfect. Neither were you. That's what made it matter. The path ahead is soft with moss now muffling your steps as the night begins to yield to a deeper calm. The wind carries faint notes of incense, distant bells, and the memory of laughter from the tea gathering. But this next stop isn't about laughter. It's about silence and structure. You're entering the realm of the tea monks. Yes, monks. Because while poets scribbled odes in candlelight, another group was refining tea into ritual. Precision, stillness, a different kind of beauty. You approach a monastery nestled into a craggy slope. Its gate is unpainted, the wood worn smooth by years of opening only when absolutely necessary. You slip inside. Here, tea isn't poured. It's prepared. Slowly, thoughtfully, with hands that have brewed the same way for decades. A single monk bows as you enter, not with ceremony, but with ease, like welcoming the breeze through a window. He gestures for you to sit. The space is spare. No ornate scrolls, no idle chatter, just stone wood and the soft swirl of steam rising from an earthen pot. This is Chancha Zen tea. The Tang Dynasty is where tea truly married meditation. Buddhist monks, especially those from the Chan tradition, which would evolve into Japanese Zen, began to treat tea not just as nourishment or stimulant, but as a spiritual anchor, a way to prepare the mind for stillness. The monk places a bowl in front of you. It's simple, unglazed, warm to the touch. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't explain. He just sits. So you do the same. Time shifts. The tea smells faintly of pine needles and rain. It tastes clean like a river washed through a stone and left a story behind. No sweeteners, no extra herbs, just the leaf and the water and your breath. And that's enough. Because here the ritual is the teaching. You don't meditate to escape the world. You meditate to see it clearly. Tea helps. It pulls the mind inward, settles the body, anchors the now. Monks often drank tea before long sessions of sitting meditation to keep alert without jitter. It wasn't about stimulation, it was about awareness. Just enough clarity to hear your own thoughts, and eventually, let them go. A crow calls once from the roof. The monk doesn't flinch. Neither do you. You begin to notice everything: the faint crack on the side of your bowl, the swirl of steam, mirrored in your breath, the rhythm of the monks inhaling, exhaling. This isn't boredom. This is presence. And it's hard. Monks didn't always make it look easy. There are records of novice monks falling asleep mid-meditation, only to be gently, or not so gently, nudged awake with a bamboo switch. Legend says one monk, Bodhidharma, cut off his own eyelids to stay awake, a story many scholars believe was symbolic, not literal. Hopefully. Historians still argue whether tea was central to early Chan practice, or simply a convenience that grew into custom, but no one doubts its presence. By the Middle Tang monasteries had tea fields, tea rooms, and tea philosophies. The monk pours you a second bowl. Same steps, same silence, but something feels different now. You notice your hands aren't fidgeting. Your thoughts have stopped bouncing. The tea is the same, but you are not. You smile, just barely, and the monk smiles back. He says nothing, but the gesture says everything. You bow, and he bows again. No lesson, no scroll. Just a breath, a bowl, a moment. You step outside into the crisp night, the stars now fully visible in the sliver of sky above. Behind you, the monk begins to sweep the courtyard. Each stroke of his broom, a prayer you don't hear, but somehow understand. You walk on, not hurried, not lost, just still. And if you carry that stillness with you, the rest of the way, the monk would probably approve. Or at least, he wouldn't disapprove. Which, let's be honest, is about the highest praise a Zen monk gives. The road unfurls again beneath your feet, soft with pine needles and powdered dust. And though your body moves forward, your mind still lingers in that monk's quiet courtyard. You feel lighter, clearer, as if the steam of the tea is still rising through you. But the Tang world is vast, and not all rituals of tea were cloistered or contemplative. Some were spectacular. Because tonight, you're heading into something far more dramatic: the tea contests. Yes, you heard that right. Competitive tea. Think poetry slam meets brewing challenge, meets elegant food fight, all under lantern light. As the moon lifts, you find yourself descending toward a valley pavilion, lit with flickering lamps. The chatter of voices and the high twang of a pipa echo across the night air. There's laughter, tension. A crowd gathered in a wide courtyard, flanked by banners and cushions, servers darting between silk-robed spectators, holding tiny porcelain cups. You're just in time. At the center, a platform. 2 tables, 2 contestants. Each stands over a brazier, a water kettle, and a tea bowl. The ingredients are the same: powdered green tea, spring water bamboo whisks, but the outcome's wildly different. Because here, it's not just about taste, it's about technique and foam. The goal: whisk the tea into a pale green froth, so smooth, so stable, so celestial, it doesn't break for minutes. Tiny bubbles are frowned upon, visible sediment. Embarrassing. The best foam gleams like morning dew and holds like a dream you don't want to wake from. This ritual is known as dusha tea fighting, not with fists, with finesse. And yes, it was a real thing. Especially in the later Tang, and into the Tang Dynasty, but the seeds were here steeped in the rising culture of tea as performance. One scholar gently lifts his bowl and turns it, examining the swirl like it contains a prophecy. Another sips and nods thoughtfully, which seems to send one contestant into mild panic. A third judge, clearly the wild card, starts humming a tune and offers no feedback at all. The tension rises. So does the steam. You find a seat near a small stone lion statue and accept a delicate cup from a passing server. The tea within is lighter than the monk's brew floral and faintly grassy. You sip. It's lovely. But now you're curious. How did we go from mountain stillness to frothy drama? Well, blame or thank China's booming urban culture during the Tang. As cities grew, so did a sense of performance. Artists, scholars, tea masters, they all wanted to impress, to be remembered, to outpour, and outpour again. Tea was no exception. Some participants brought their own water from sacred springs. Others handcrafted their tools. One eccentric reportedly cooled his whisk between stirs by waving it gently beneath the wing of a trained parrot. Okay, that one's probably myth, but you want to believe it. Historians still argue whether these contests were primarily entertainment or spiritual practice dressed in flair. Some say they were deeply rooted in Zen aesthetics, turning every detail into meditation. Others call it stylized one-upmanship. Both are probably true. And then came the poets. Because of course there were poets. They sat along the edges, scribbling furiously, composing verses about the rise and fall of foam, the symbolic clarity of a perfectly whisked bowl, the existential dread of oversteeping. Well, maybe not that last one. Poetry and tea, it turns out, shared a rhythm. And even now, under the lanterns, someone stands to read. Beneath my brush, the leaves rise pale like morning's breath in a porcelain sail. I drink. I see. The world turns slow, and still the bubbles do not go. A round of applause, modest but sincere. You can't help but smile, because sure, some of it's pomp. But isn't that part of the beauty? The idea that even tea, something so humble, so domestic, could be elevated to art, to sport, to song, the final contestant bows. Her bowl gleams faintly green, a smooth mirror of foam that sways but doesn't break. The judges nod. One claps. The wildcard judge sings something off-key but approving. A winner is declared. But no one seems to care. The true victory here is the experience, the gathering, the joy of people sipping and laughing and remembering that even a single cup can hold elegance. You rise as the crowd begins to drift apart, your hands warmed by your empty bowl, your ears full of soft music and whispered compliments. The path calls you forward again, away from the laughter, back into the quiet, but not before you glance over your shoulder at the stage just once, just long enough to remember that tea like dreams is as much about the brewing as the meaning. And the night isn't over yet. You leave the courtyard behind, just as the lanterns begin to gutter out, flickering gently, like moths who've forgotten their purpose. The path winds north now into a cooler part of the city. Narrower streets shaded by tall pines and thick walls. And ahead, something quieter waits. Less about ritual, less about ceremony, more about memory. Because not every tea story during the Tang Dynasty happened under palace eaves or temple bells. Some happened in kitchens, some happened in grief, and some never made it into scrolls at all. You duck into a small alley, guided more by instinct than invitation. There in the crook of two intersecting walls is a courtyard. Modest, lined with old clay pots, a withered plum tree, and a thin trail of smoke curling from a small iron kettle. An old man is seated cross-legged on a mat, stirring a pot with one hand and wiping his eyes with the other. You pause. He gestures for you to join him. You do, and for a while, Neither of you speaks. Eventually, he pours you a cup. The tea is thick, almost medicinal. Sharp with herbs you can't quite name, sweetened with what might be jujube. It tastes healing. Not in the soft, delicate way of a nobleman's brew, but in the you've just been through something and need to sit down kind of way. Turns out that's exactly what this is. A morning tea. See, tea in Tang China wasn't only for celebration or artistry. It was used in morning rituals, shared in silence, sipped at the end of wakes, or brewed quietly by widows, siblings, friends who had no more words left and turned instead to warmth. There are poems, sad ones written on fragments of porcelain cups left at tombs. Messages like, "Your breath no longer warms this tea, so I drink it for you." Historians still argue whether tea in mourning was symbolic of purification, remembrance, or just the comfort of heat in a cold moment. Probably all three. Probably more. The man beside you sighs and explains, not with drama, just with the casual honesty of someone who's carried grief too long to keep it fancy, that the tea you're drinking is made with roots gathered from the hill where his wife was buried. Not for magic, for memory. He stirs again. The steam rises. You sip. There's silence. And that silence says more than any toast ever could. Because rituals don't always need priests. They don't always need perfect bowls or temple gardens. Sometimes they just need one person to stop boil water and say quietly, "I remember." You think back on all the other cups you've had along this journey. The nervous energy of the first roadside bowl. The trance-like steeping in the monk's sanctuary. The frothy whirl of the tea contests. The gods painted onto the sides of kettles. And now, this. A cup shared in memory, not majesty. A cup that doesn't ask for applause, just presence. And in that moment, you realize these forgotten tea rituals weren't all about the method, or the ingredients, or even the tea itself. They were about connection, through flavor, through silence, through time. Because while dynasties rose and fell, and emperors drafted new etiquette, and scribes copied manuals filled with flowery directions and metaphors involving dragons and dew, the people brewed. Every day. Without fanfare. They brewed when they were happy, when they were sick, when they were lost, when they were found. And sometimes they brewed to remember someone who couldn't. You glance at the old man. He's nodding off just slightly as the kettle murmurs beside him. You place your empty cup down quietly and tuck your hands into your sleeves. There's nothing more to say. And that in itself feels like part of the ritual. You step out into the dusk, soft, now fading into blue, and find the road waiting once again. You've almost come full circle. One more stop. One last story. But already you can feel it settling in the quiet weight of everything you've tasted, seen, wondered. It's not just history. It's tea. And it's taken you farther than you expected. The final stretch carries you back toward the edge of the city. The gates are quiet now, only the rustle of bamboo leaves and the distant clink of someone's late-night bowl against a washing stone. The moon is a pale coin overhead, and your thoughts are warm, steeped in steam and silence. You follow a side path along the river, where the reeds whisper secrets and the stones are slick with moss. There's one more house tucked here, a scholar's cottage, they say, though whether it belongs to an actual scholar or simply someone who reads a lot and forgets to comb their hair is unclear. Either way, the door is open. You step inside. It smells of paper wood smoke and something toasted. A small brazier glows in the corner, and a woman is seated cross-legged beside it, stirring tea with a bamboo whisk in deliberate meditative strokes. She nods at you, but doesn't speak. You understand. No need for words now. She pours the tea light, amber-topped with a ring of tiny bubbles that shimmer in the lamplight. You sip, and it tastes like memory. This is it. the last cup. You don't know exactly what's in it, likely a blend of roasted millet chrysanthemum and perhaps the last pinch of spring-picked green. But it doesn't matter, because what you're tasting now is the culmination of a journey, from the misty mountains where monks brewed in silence, to the palaces where contest judges debated the depth of froth, to the quiet huts of mourning, to this final flickering moment by a scholar's fire. Tea in the Tang Dynasty was not one thing, it was everything. A science, a superstition, a prayer, a habit, a performance, and most of all, a conversation between you and the leaf, between the past and the present, between one person's hand and another's cup. Historians still argue whether the tea culture of the Tang truly rivaled that of later dynasties. Song tea gets all the press. Ming tea gets all the porcelains. But Tang tea built the road. It was the beginning, and beginnings, especially the quiet ones, deserve to be remembered. You set your empty bowl beside the fire and lean back, eyes closed. The night hums around you, not with noise but with presence. The scrolls might fade, the kettles might rust, the herbs might vanish into soil. But the act remains. You heat water, you offer a cup, you create a moment. And maybe, just maybe, that moment travels forward, past hand to hand, bowl to bowl, life to life, until someone like you stumbles upon it again. In a dusty book, in a forgotten recipe, in a midnight dream, or in a bedtime story whispered while the tea cools. You rise, give the quietest bow, and step back into the night. The wind is gentle now, the stars steady, and your breath no longer tastes of questions, but of something resolved. Tomorrow, you may drink a different tea, with oat milk, or in a to-go cup, and that's fine, because now you'll know that even in that rush of modern life, the ritual lingers, not in perfection, but in intention, in warmth shared, in silence welcomed, in stories carried like steam in a cracked bowl. You walk to the edge of the river, the moon overhead, and you let the last of your thoughts settle like tea leaves in a quiet cup. You've come far. You've heard the whispers. You've tasted the centuries. And now it's time to rest. The road fades behind you. Now soft as smoke curling into sky. The kettle has cooled. The cups are empty, and even the memories seem content to dim. Let yourself breathe slower. Let the scent of roasted tea leaves melt into stillness. You are no longer in Chang'an. Not truly. But the echo of it lingers in the hush between thoughts, in the rhythm of your breath, in the simple grace of having been somewhere sacred, if only in story. You carry more than history now. You carry the quiet art of presence, of sitting still while the water warms, of noticing how light plays in a rising curl of steam, of waiting not for answers, but for the right kind of silence. So, lie back. Let your weight ease into whatever holds you. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on water, unrushed, unburdened, unjudged. You don't have to understand every symbol. You don't have to remember every name. It's enough that you traveled with care, that you listened, that you tasted what was offered. And now, as the darkness grows gentler and your thoughts grow softer, know this: you are safe, you are warm, and somewhere in the quiet heart of the Tang Dynasty, a kettle boils for you. Let the story fade. Let your breath settle. Let sleep come. Thank you for joining us on this journey today. Maybe by now you've already drifted off to sleep, and if so, we hope this story brought you peace of mind and helped you rest a little easier. Deep sleep makes life better, and we're truly happy to be part of that. Until next time, sweet dreams.